secret meeting that changed rap music and destroyed a generation.
This is Crazy Bone, a well-known rapper from the legendary group Bone Thugs and Harmony. He's just one of a few artists who have spoken about a hip-hop conspiracy they believe to be true. The conspiracy is known as The Meeting. The Meeting is a theory that the heads of the music industry and heads of the prison industry secretly met up to strike a deal in the early 1990s. It's suggested that at this meeting there was an agreement made to make hip-hop more violent. Why? To influence the younger generation to commit crimes and go to jail, to which they would both profit. An anonymous person said to have been a higher up in the music industry wrote a 3-page article that's titled, "The Secret Meeting That Changed Rap Music and Destroyed a Generation." This went public in 2012, but the meeting was said to have taken place almost 2 decades before. If someone had this kind of information, why would they wait so long to speak about it?
After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. So I've simply decided to leave out the names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for.
Despite trying to remain anonymous, he then goes on to give a little more information about himself and the position he played in the meeting.
Between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came from Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then. Since technology and media weren't accessible to people like they are today, the industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted. This may explain why in early 1991 I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of 30 or so music insiders to discuss rap music's new direction.
Although what he's stating has some truth to it, he's already started this off with a lot of breadcrumbs for someone who wanted to remain anonymous. How hidden is his identity if he's already told us that he was one of 30 people in attendance, came over from Europe in the 80s, and also later revealing that he quit the music business in 1993? If someone were looking for this person for exposing a secret agenda, it wouldn't take much effort to find him even with just this information. Regardless, the story he goes on to tell is still very believable.
The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 30 people being there, most of them familiar faces. But among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be from our industry. We were then asked to sign a confidentiality agreement preventing us from publicly discussing the information we were about to receive. Needless to say, this intrigued and in some cases disturbed many of us. Violating the terms would result in termination or worse. A few people refused to sign and walked out. No one stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but the curiosity got the best of me. The floor was given to a man who introduced himself by his name and gave no further details about his personal background. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in the music industry, then congratulated us for being selected as part of a small group of decision makers. The subject then quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the company we worked for had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our help. He explained they invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profit of these investments. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. And because these prisons were privately owned, they could become publicly traded and we'd be able to buy shares of stock. Everybody involved could make a lot of money. It was now in their best interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. And it was our job to help make this happen by marketing music which promotes criminal behavior, with rap being the music of choice.
As the months passed, he states rap music definitely changed direction. Acts that talked about politics or harmless fun were quickly fading away as gangster rap started dominating the airways. The writer describes feeling guilty as he realized their plan had already started working. This guilt would ultimately lead up to the writing of this letter 20 years later. In short, we're talking about a secret agenda to promote violence among the hip-hop fanbase and fill prisons for profit. This idea in itself is very believable and could be real, but there are some holes that weaken the credibility of the writer. The story itself was emailed to someone named Ivan who worked for hiphopisred.com. I don't know this person or website and I'm sure they do a great job. But if you were once a high-power music executive with a shaking confession that you've held on to for almost 20 years, why would you choose this platform over Rolling Stone, LA Times, or The Source to expose your story? If you were in the industry for that long, surely you'd have a better connection out there. In addition, the theory fails in other regards as well. When did gangsta rap start? For someone who might not know too much about hip-hop, they might say in the early 90s, the same time that this meeting was held. But looking back, this isn't entirely true, as it had been around for years before that. In 1986, Ice-T released a song titled 6 in the Morning, which is often talked about as the first ever gangsta rap song where he spoke about shooting cops. Philadelphia's Schoolie D was rapping about shooting people and drug use 4 albums deep by 1991, and Too Short was already firm on the scene as well. Even though his music wasn't as political, it still had the same messages that would later define gangsta rap music. But perhaps the best example is the notorious case of NWA.
The music industry was encouraged to stop releasing the music, and a U.S. senator threatened to hold public hearings on the subject.
Back in 1987 and 1988, NWA was being banned from most mainstream American radio stations, which completely goes against the theory that music execs wanted to promote them to fill their agenda. Or does it? Even though I just stated some reasons why this conspiracy may be false, there's actually some evidence that says otherwise. What if these early artists like NWA set the foundation, and after the higher-ups realized they couldn't stop the music from being made, they then resorted to finding ways they too could profit and extort it, which supports the prison theory. There's no question that incarceration rates skyrocketed right around the same time that gangster rap came into popularity, starting in the 80s and following trend through the 1990s at its peak. But it would be ignorant to say that this was solely because of rap music. Profiling, police corruption, poverty, and new criminal codes all contributed to this massive increase of arrests. But again, for someone investing in these private prisons, this would have been a very profitable time as they were filling up quick. It's possible they saw this massive trend upward and were looking for more ways to keep the money coming in. Taking a look back at the Billboard charts, there's some evidence to support this idea. In 1989, there were 0 singles within the top 15 that could even be called rap, even though it was already becoming increasingly popular. The media was definitely not promoting it. In 1990, once again, 0 songs. Then in 1991, the time this meeting was said to have taken place, we started to see hip-hop chart for the first time. MC Hammer, Run DMC, and others. But it wasn't gangsta rap by any means. In 1992, the same concept shows, slowly more and more rap popped up on the charts, almost as if they were in stage 1 of their plan. Get people used to the genre before unleashing its subgenre of gangsta rap to the world. By 1993, this is when we started seeing Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and Ice Cube with chart-topping songs, which was groundbreaking for that time. And if you are a conspiracy theorist, you could call that phase 2, where they were really starting to make a promotional push. The last and final phase would be completed over the coming years as gangsta rap went from a niche genre to a mainstream sensation. And as the hip-hop fanbase was exploding, the prisons were quickly filling.